Welcome to The Debate. So picture a 22-year-old college grad navigating today's hyper-competitive world. They wake up at 5 a.m., take a 39-degree cold plunge, they meticulously time block their 12-hour workday.
Oh, and they're probably listening to an audiobook at 2x speed, right?
Right, exactly. And yet, despite all of that, they still suffer from debilitating panic attacks. We're seeing an entire generation turn to ancient philosophy, specifically Stoicism, as as a hyper-optimized productivity hack.
Yeah, it's everywhere right now.
It really is. But when we look at the reality of building a career, navigating an unpredictable economy or facing professional failure, we have to ask, is it actually working?
I think it's the defining tension of modern productivity culture. There's this illusion that if you just input the right habits, the output is guaranteed success. But human ambition is murky, and it's a critical question, especially because Stoicism is just exploding in popularity right now.
Mm-hmm.
Young adults are drawing on these classical texts from Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, but those texts are being morphed into contemporary internet trends like broicism.
Which brings us to the core of our discussion today. For a student encountering philosophy for the first time, Stoicism is often presented as the ultimate framework for navigating that exact tension. But are the 4 core Stoic virtues actually a practical operating system for ambitious young adults today? Or do these ancient principles fundamentally clash with the realities of modern ambition?
Right.
To lay my cards on the table, I will argue that the Stoic virtues provide an essential, practical compass that channels youthful ambition toward genuine fulfillment, and that they actively prevent the toxic burnout we see so often today.
And I'll argue that true Stoic philosophy demands a level of radical detachment from external success that is, it's fundamentally incompatible with the self-interested nature of modern ambition.
Okay, let me start by outlining my perspective here. If you're a young adult stepping into a brutal economy, you absolutely need an operating system. I argue that the 4 Stoic virtues, so that's wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, are the most practical tools available.
Even in today's landscape?
Especially today, because modern ambition without virtue leads to anxiety, exhaustion, and just ruthless behavior. We see this in the broicism trend, which twists Stoicism into this cold, hyper-competitive life hack. But true Stoicism doesn't ask students to abandon their career goals. Instead, it teaches them to treat external successes like wealth and status as what the Stoics called preferred indifference.
Right, the preferred indifference.
Exactly. By utilizing specific psychological mechanics, like the reserve clause, ambitious youth can pursue success vigorously while maintaining emotional equilibrium. They learn to focus entirely on the effort, not the outcome.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I agree that Stoicism offers excellent psychological coping mechanisms for stress. Cognitive behavioral therapy is directly built on it, after all.
Right. CBT owes a huge debt to it.
But Stoicism is not just a coping mechanism. It's a rigorous ethical framework. And its core demand is that virtue is the only good. Career, wealth, status, these are truly indifferent to human happiness. So asking a modern young adult who is entering a brutal economy and drowning in university debt to view their financial survival as completely indifferent is frankly deeply impractical. The current popularity of Stoicism among ambitious youth is a distortion.
In what way?
Well, they're stripping away the intense ethical demands of the philosophy just to use it as a productivity hack. When push comes to shove, the strict demands of Stoic virtue stand in direct opposition to the inherently self-interested nature of modern personal ambition.
I think the best way to unpack this is to look at how a young person actually experiences these concepts in real time, starting from the moment they enter the job market. Let's begin with the first virtue, which is wisdom.
Okay.
For a student new to philosophy, wisdom in Stoicism isn't about knowing a lot of facts. It's defined as knowing what is good, what is bad, and what is indifferent. Crucially, it involves understanding the dichotomy of control.
Separating what's up to us from what isn't.
Exactly. Our choices and judgments are up to us, but the final outcome is not.
Which is incredibly difficult to do when the outcome dictates whether you can afford groceries.
It is, yeah. But the mechanism behind it is really powerful. I mean, think of the classical Stoic analogy of the archer. But let's modernize it for this context. Instead of an archer, imagine our 22-year-old grad sending a pitch deck to a venture capitalist.
Sure.
The grad can build a flawless financial model. They can practice their pitch until it's perfect, research the firm. That is the aim, and it is entirely within their control. But the moment the email is sent, the outcome is completely out of their hands. The VC might be having a bad day, or, macroeconomic interest rates might have just spiked. That is the wind. Wisdom teaches a student to focus solely on the aim.
Right. The effort is in their control. The wind isn't. But here's the problem. In 2026, if that pitch misses, the founder's startup goes under. The archer just shrugs and tries again. If a young professional misses the target, the consequences are existential.
Well,
labeling career success as a mere preferred indifferent minimizes the profound real-world consequences of failure. I just have to ask, can a young person genuinely view their first major career setback with Stoic apathy?
that's an interesting point, though I would frame it a bit differently because we have to define what apathy actually means here. Stoic apathy, or apatheia, it doesn't mean being an emotionless robot who doesn't care if they fail.
Right.
It means freedom from toxic passions. The Stoic student still strongly prefers to get the VC funding. They just don't tie their fundamental human worth or their inner peace to that term sheet. And they do this mechanically using what Stoics call the reserve clause. They act with the mindset of fate permitting.
So like adding a mental asterisk to their goals.
Exactly. It's a cognitive framing trick. When a student says, I will secure this funding, fate permitting, they are preemptively coding failure as an acceptable reality in their brain's risk assessment center.
Okay, but
The anxiety that paralyzes so many ambitious young people comes precisely from trying to control the wind. By actively accepting that the wind is out of their control, their cortisol levels drop, their focus narrows, and they actually perform better in the pitch room.
let's look at the psychology of that for a second. Are they genuinely accepting failure? Or are they just tricking their brain to lower cortisol so they can keep grinding?
What do you mean?
I mean, you tell an ambitious student that the outcome doesn't matter, only their virtuous effort does. In practice, they still desperately want the outcome. They want the six-figure salary. They want the promotion. They just use the dichotomy of control to suppress their anxiety so they can work 80 hours a week without having a panic attack.
Huh.
That isn't achieving Stoic wisdom. That is just anesthetizing yourself to survive a toxic corporate culture.
Well, if we follow our young professional's journey, let's say the reserve clause works. They detach from the outcome, their pitch lands, and they get the job. Now they are immediately pressured to work those 80-hour weeks you just mentioned. This is where the framework usually breaks down for people, unless we introduce the second virtue, which is temperance.
Which is usually defined as self-restraint.
Right, temperance is moderation, self-discipline, and the avoidance of excess in all things. It means practicing self-control over our desires, and that includes the desire for wealth and status. I argue that temperance is the ultimate antidote to the hustle culture you described.
How so?
Hustle culture tells our 22-year-old they need to sacrifice sleep, relationships, and health to build their personal brand. Temperance steps in and teaches them to value long-term well-being and moral character over the ego's desire for instant recognition. It's the mechanical brake that prevents burnout.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that modern ambition often structurally requires excess?
In what way?
We don't live in a balanced professional world. To get that startup funded, or to make partner at a top law firm, or even just to stand out in a flooded job market, obsessive focus is the baseline. You have to relentlessly network. You have to be always on.
But assuming that hyper-obsessive excess yields the best long-term results is a fallacy, the data shows that chronic burnout destroys cognitive function and decision-making. I mean, look at Seneca.
Okay.
He was a wealthy, highly ambitious statesman, yet he practiced voluntary discomfort. He would spend a few days a month eating the cheapest food and wearing rough clothes. He wasn't doing it to punish himself. He was proving to his own brain that his happiness didn't depend on luxury.
Right.
That moderation didn't dull his edge, it sharpened it. It removed the underlying fear of losing his status.
Seneca is a fascinating example because he embodies this exact contradiction. He preached moderation while amassing one of the largest fortunes in the Roman Empire and lending money at exorbitant interest rates.
That's a fair critique of his personal life.
Sure. But let's bring it back to our 22-year-old grad. You define temperance as avoiding excess. Yet ambition is, almost by definition, an excessive desire for achievement. If a student truly internalizes that material success is unnecessary for a good life, their motivation to stay up until 2 a.m. perfecting a pitch deck just evaporates.
Not necessarily.
They'll just go to sleep, which is the temperate thing to do, and the peer sitting next to them, who is entirely driven by ego and fear, will stay up, finish the deck, and win the pitch. By asking an ambitious young person to practice strict voluntary simplicity, true Stoic temperance might actively blunt the competitive edge they need just to establish a foothold.
Perhaps the ego-driven peer does win that specific pitch, but at what cost? The Stoics would argue that trading your peace of mind and your cardiovascular health for a temporary corporate victory is a deeply irrational bargain.
It might be irrational to a philosopher, but it is the reality of the gig economy. But let's say our young grad tries to be temperate. They go to sleep at midnight instead of 2 a.m. Because of that, they miss a crucial detail. The pitch fails, and now they are facing the terrifying prospect of being fired. What happens when the moderation fails and the fear sets in?
That is precisely where the third virtue, courage, is required. For a student, courage in Stoicism is not just physical bravery. It's mental and emotional resilience. It's the strength to act rightly in the face of fear, adversity, and anxiety, without being overwhelmed by initial panicked impressions.
How does that actually work in the brain of someone staring at an email from HR?
Well, the Stoics had a brilliant mechanical understanding of emotion. There's a famous story about a Stoic teacher on a ship caught in a violent storm. The philosopher turns pale and starts shaking just like everyone else on board. The Stoics recognize that the initial physiological reaction, the elevated heart rate, the sweating, it's completely automatic. They called those proto-emotions.
Okay.
Getting that HR email and feeling your stomach drop is a proto-emotion. You can't control it.
Right. It's physiological.
But courage is what happens in the millisecond after. True emotion, the kind that causes suffering, requires your conscious assent. The philosopher on the ship refuses to assent to the panic. He uses his reason to recognize that the storm is out of his control. So for our student reading the HR email, courage is feeling the heart rate spike, but refusing to agree with the false belief that losing the job is an absolute catastrophic evil.
I love the mechanics of that. The cognitive evaluation causes the suffering, not the event itself. But here is where the modern application really fractures for me. The concept of Stoic courage has been entirely hijacked.
By the online communities?
Exactly. In these online broicism circles, courage has been distorted to mean just, being tough, suppressing your proto-emotions entirely and dominating your competitors to ensure you never get fired in the first place.
Which is a complete misreading of the texts.
Absolutely. Because true Stoic courage isn't about avoiding the layoff. It's about willing to accept the layoff if the job requires you to compromise your virtue. True courage is standing up to a toxic boss. It's refusing to falsify the data on a report, even if it costs you the promotion.
Right.
And I have to ask you honestly, does modern ambition allow room for that level of self-sacrifice? Personal ambition is fundamentally about self-advancement. If a 24-year-old sacrifices their career trajectory for a point of ethical purity, society doesn't reward them. They just end up unemployed, while the less ethical peer gets the corner office.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes the only goal of ambition is the corner office. Which brings us perfectly to the final and perhaps most important virtue, which is justice.
Okay.
Standing up to that toxic boss usually means you are protecting someone else, a coworker, a client, or the public. Cicero called justice the crowning glory of the virtues. In Stoicism, justice doesn't mean a legal system. It means treating others with fairness, integrity, and prioritizing the common good over oneself. Marcus Aurelius famously wrote, "What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees." We are all deeply interconnected.
And this is the breaking point. This right here is where the tension between Stoicism and modern ambition snaps completely.
Well, let's look at how the Stoics bridge the gap between self-interest and justice.
They use this psychological concept called okaikiosis, which translates roughly to appropriation or familiarization. The philosopher Hierocles described it as a series of concentric circles. At the center is the self.
Right.
The next circle out is your family, then your friends, then your local community, and finally, the outer circle encompasses all of humanity.
Radical cosmopolitanism?
Exactly. The lifelong practice of Stoic justice is to continually pull those outer circles inward. You train your mind to treat the concerns of your local community with the same weight as the concerns of your family. I argue this actually elevates a student's ambition.
How?
Instead of a narrow, anxiety-inducing drive for selfish accumulation, their ambition expands into a sense of civic duty. They want to succeed so they can build better systems and help the Beehive.
That concept of ichthyosis is intellectually gorgeous, I'll give you that. But let's bring it back to our 24-year-old junior analyst on a Tuesday afternoon. There is one promotion available. They are sitting next to their desk mate who wants the exact same promotion. Corporate ladders are inherently individualistic and zero-sum.
They can be, yes.
You are competing for a limited pool of resources. If true Stoic justice requires our analysts to treat the career advancement of their deskmate, a competitor, with the exact same weight as their own, how do they function? Do they self-sabotage to help their peer? You literally cannot play the modern corporate game with that mindset.
I see why it looks like a paradox, but Stoics don't advocate for self-sabotage. They use the analogy of the actor in a play. Your role right now is the junior analyst. You must play that role to the absolute best of your ability. You work hard, you innovate, you try to earn the promotion.
Right.
But you do it without stepping on the neck of your deskmate. If your peer gets the promotion because they were genuinely better, justice requires you to celebrate that because it benefits the company, the Beehive.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that a highly ambitious 24-year-old is going to celebrate losing a massive salary bump because it benefits the Beehive. That sounds like a corporate social responsibility brochure.
Well,
The reality is that personal branding and modern ambition focus exclusively on the self. Persicism ignores justice entirely for this exact reason. They cherry-pick the dichotomy of control to maximize their own productivity while completely discarding the Stoic obligation to the common good.
I agree they do that, but that's a misapplication.
But you cannot simultaneously optimize for ruthless personal success and practice radical Stoic cosmopolitanism. The philosophy demands that virtue is the only good. If you truly believe that, you wouldn't care about the promotion at all.
But Stoicism does not demand that we abandon the world. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. He held the most powerful, ambitious position on the planet. He managed a vast economy and commanded armies.
True.
Yet he wrote to himself daily about patience, empathy, and pulling those concentric circles inward. He didn't flee to a cave to meditate. He stayed in the world and tried to apply virtue to the messy, often zero-sum reality of leadership. Stoicism is designed for the marketplace, not the monastery.
That's a fair point. But Marcus Aurelius was born into the imperial family. He didn't have to claw his way up a corporate ladder, outmaneuvering peers to pay off student loans.
Well, sure. His circumstances were different.
I take your point that wielding power is its own profound test of character. Still, I maintain that when we look at an ambitious student today, the core ethical demand of Stoicism creates an unresolved tension. The philosophy says external success is completely indifferent. Modern society says external success is the metric of human value. You can't fully serve two masters.
Which brings us to a natural point to summarize where we've landed. The way I view this is that the four virtues, wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice, act as an essential stabilizing compass for a young person.
Mm-hmm.
The modern world demands ambition, but ambition without a framework is just a recipe for burnout and moral compromise. By practicing wisdom to separate the aim from the wind, temperance to avoid the exhaustion of hustle culture, courage to manage the proto-emotions of fear, and justice to elevate their work beyond mere selfishness, young adults can pursue their goals vigorously. They can strive for excellence without losing their minds to factors outside their control.
And my summary is that while the psychological mechanics of Stoicism, like the reserve clause and managing those proto-emotions, are undeniably useful for surviving a harsh economy, its core ethical framework is deeply at odds with modern ambition.
Right.
To truly practice Stoicism requires treating your career and your status as utterly indifferent to your happiness. Because that standard is so incredibly difficult to maintain when rent is due, what we see today is often a diluted, cherry-picked version of the philosophy. Ambitious young adults adopt the armor of Stoicism to protect themselves from stress, but they discard the heavy, career-limiting obligations of Stoic justice.
Even with that tension, I think we can both agree that the Stoic critique of ego, anxiety, and runaway desires is something our hyper-optimized culture desperately needs to hear. Even if achieving perfect Stoic sagehood is impossible for our 22-year-old grad, attempting to reconcile their ambition with virtue remains a profoundly worthwhile pursuit.
Absolutely. The tension itself is what produces growth. Wrestling with these ancient texts forces you to stop and ask what you actually value. When you face that inevitable career failure, what matters more? The title on your resume or the character you display when everything falls apart?
Which brings us back to that algorithm we started with. The allure of modern productivity is that it promises a perfect map. You know, a clean equation where input always equals a successful output.
Right.
But human life is not a machine, and the wind is always blowing. When that map inevitably fails, you don't need a better algorithm. You need a compass. The Stoic texts offer one hell of a compass, but it is ultimately up to the listener to decide if they are willing to follow where it points in the modern world.